Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Soaring Through Chaos. And the reason we do this show is because we are in the midst of a lot of changes. We are in the midst of perhaps the most chaotic time in our lifetime as a collective. And with the pandemic, with changes in healthcare directives almost every day, with the potential loss of jobs and the whole changing scene in terms of sustainability, and with a lot of finger pointing that comes with it. Blame games, whether it is with the government or with each other or with other ethnic groups, these are not easy times. But amid all this, the difficulties we are facing are presenting us with all kinds of unprecedented opportunities to grow up. And I find that there are people who are mentoring, who are supporting each other. One of my daily mentors is Anne Moore. Anne, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
And what Anne does for anybody who follows her on Facebook is a Facebook Live program almost every day, almost an hour long, which is sharing her wisdom with yoga. And she's, normally when we look at yoga, we look at young models or young women and men who are doing energetic yoga. And this young woman has been encouraging people of all ages to come out of their misery by finding themselves by being grounded. Tell us about your journey and how did you get started and what makes you do this every single day?
How I got started was um, I was working for YWCA, and it was a very conservative town of Lubbock, Texas. Texas Tech University is there. And I had gone to a few yoga classes at the Y. And my boss at the time was my spiritual mentor, but I didn't know it. She would just say things like, oh, there's a meditation class over here at this Wednesday night. I think you ought to go, you know. And she wanted to encourage me. She saw me before I saw myself on a spiritual path. And then she said to me, I think you need to be a yoga teacher. Before I knew it, it was like she could see my path before I saw my path. And then shortly after that time, it's really interesting. I guess it doesn't matter because I'm at the end of the stage now, but I never even had a yoga certificate. I mean, I didn't have this 200 hours, 500 hours, or whatever they have. What happened, this was about 1982, I think. And I went to Esalen, and my son Soaring he was working at Esalen, had some extra hours for a workshop. So I went and did a yoga workshop there with, who was it? Trying to think, someplace in Santa Barbara, they had a studio. Anyways, and they came up, and I can't remember their names. It's been so long. But I felt after doing some training with them, but I didn't have the official thing or anything. I felt like I could do this. And so I just started getting calls. It was the weirdest. As soon as I set up, this is what I wanted to do, I got a call from a couple of churches. We're looking for a yoga teacher, and one church, and then the two progressive churches. And that's how I started was, and my first job interview for a yoga teacher, I'd broken my leg, and I was in a cast, and I had to do an interview with this guy at the hospital because I was supposed to teach a class there. And he said, oh, I wanted you to do a video or something. I said, well, or not a video, a demonstration. And I said, in this cast. He said, oh, I'll just hire you. I like your spirit. So that's how I got my first job.
Wow, that's a fascinating journey. In what ways have practices such as yoga, and I believe you also meditate and you do many of these other things, in what ways did it change your life? In what ways, how did it help you?
The hugest thing probably was, and not many people would know this, but I was in my 40s, I was a marathon runner. And I thought it would be healthy for me while I was working two jobs and trying to run all this. And I got very, very sick. I got, the Epstein-Barr, the chronic fatigue stuff. And I missed work for 3 months. I was terrible shape. And I'd been a runner, and I still tried to run again when I got a little better. Well, then I fell down the stairs and broke my knee. So I said, okay, God's talking, enough of this running, So when I started interest in yoga was for the chronic fatigue. because I could not go out and run with a broken knee, plus I was too weak. So I said, how can I regain my health? So I started reading up. And so I started doing yoga, and I found out that it could heal me. In the sense, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, there's not a lot of drugs for it, let's face it. You live with it, and you know. But there is healing things that really, really help. Massage really helps, yoga, meditation. And so I really came to yoga to heal me and then help heal others, I guess.
Wow. We met about 6 years ago at the Wisdom 2.0 conference, and I have your son, Soaring to say thank you to, because he's the one who was the founder, and you brought together people in the tech industry as well as in the healing and the wisdom spaces. Most of my life I was in the tech industry. Although I was born in the land of yoga, I hardly ever practiced these things early on in my life. It wasn't until my body broke down in my 40s, when I was 38, that I got back into yoga and vipassana and meditation. Because I was so busy with technology. You know how it is? Silicon Valley is all about technology, and we forget the technology of life. And it was people like Soren who brought people in the world of technology, whether they were at Facebook or Google or Yahoo or Twitter, with the world of practitioners of mindfulness, with the world of practitioners of Tai Chi and yoga and all that. So I really want to thank Soren and hundreds of people who worked with him, Ben Salzman, Paul Zelizer, and you. What did you do to get a son like Soren, who has done so much for the world?
People have asked me that before, you know, and I said, he was born special. I'll tell you a story. I had, let's see, I had a 7-year-old, and then I had Soren, who was 4 at that time, and then I had a 2-year-old, and I had twins born. And I was no family to help me. That's when I actually started chronic fatigue, I think. And so Soren would come up to me and say, Mama, he was 4, can I get you some diapers for the babies? Is there anything you need? And I thought, how could a 4-year-old be so in tune with the mother's feelings rather than, you know, I'm going to go play? And so I thought, I knew there was something different about him starting out, really.
Wow, that is a fascinating story. And what I've noticed, we first met about 6 years ago, and I think a couple times every year we would meet. And now I'm seeing you after another 4 years, because I've been mostly outside the US in the last 4 years. What I find interesting, Anne, is that you seem to be reverse aging. Through this pandemic where everybody's panicking, a lot of people are anxious, worried about their health, you're doing something which is very different. You seem to be very centered all through the pain and suffering. And you even share your suffering. Recently, you shared a potential health condition too. Tell us about what gives you that inner strength to continue to be on this journey of life.
And it's so interesting you asked that question, because sometimes I totally lose it too. When they were told that I had this cancerous thing last week, I mean, I did. But once, you know what it is? Having tools. You know, and they're different tools for different people. Meditation and yoga, because they help heal the nervous system. And I went to a woman who's a DO doctor and a healer in Santa Cruz. And I said, you got to help me with my nervous system, because I was given this diagnosis, and they called and said, no, it wasn't cancer, but then my nervous system was up. And she did a lot of stuff, even on my brainstem, to open up so I could have other thought patterns. And that's amazing. So I would say finding the healing modalities that will ever work for you, you know?
Yeah.
It takes you center.
And we are very fortunate in places like Santa Cruz, California, or Berkeley to have all kinds of healers. I had to do that too. My body was falling apart when I was barely 38 years old because of excessive 18 hours of work per day, the Silicon Valley bug. And what really helped was having not just doctors, but really people who are into mind-body medicine. And that's why I moved away from being a hardcore technologist into the healing professions, into neuroscience, to compassion practices. And I'm so grateful that because of those practices, I found Wisdom 2.0 and I met amazing people like you. So,
Well, you know, okay, go ahead.
yeah, please go ahead.
Well, just thinking about how my body took me to yoga, your body made you have to give up that world and go to a different world. You see what I'm saying? It was a blessing. If your body hadn't broken down, you may have just mentally you were going, you know?
Yes, exactly. In fact, Dr. Yoav, Dr. Yoav, who I met as a friend, Dr. Avi Heskovitz, he told me, look, Shankar, most doctors will tell you that the problem is with your feet. I had something called plantar fasciitis, where it's like pinpricks on your foot. And I had tendonitis because of excessive use of computers.
Right.
He said, most people will tell you the problem is with their hands and feet. But he said, no, the problem is you're not getting enough rest.
Oh,
You're not
great.
relaxing. And I said, how do you know that? He said, you're hyper all the time. Talk about the nervous system. He said, you're super hyper all the time. You need to find a way to chill. I said, I sleep 6 hours. I was like, 6 hours, but what happens when you sleep? Tell me what happens. I said, I kind of hypnotize myself and all the problems I face during the day, I remember them and I go to sleep. And in my sleep, I can solve all those problems. And he said, that's your problem. I said, how can that be a problem? I'm able to function 24/7. He said, yes, you are functioning 24/7. My friend, you're not getting any rest. And that's unfortunately very common in Silicon Valley and in many regions of the world, especially now, because people are working from home and there's this expectation of 24/7 by 365. So having these practices like turning the phone off or digital fasting is very helpful. It changed my life for sure. And that's how I met people like you and Ben and Paul and Soren and others who are constant reminders how to find this balance. And of course, I have my teachers in India and in other parts of the world as well. How did you find balance in your life? You were working 2 jobs, taking care of, did you say 4 or 5 children at one time?
Oh, I didn't. That's when I got real sick with mononucleosis and ended up in the chronic fatigue syndrome. You can't push too hard too long. You see? Yeah. And that's my body had a break and be in bed until I got my lesson. I wish I'd tell it people, don't let that happen. Don't get sick before you start resting. If I could tell them anything, listen to your body. Pay attention to it,
In fact, I would love to see if we can share your video because you do these daily sessions. Could we have a look at your Facebook Live for a few seconds?
Sure.
I'm going to try to share the screen and see if I can bring it up. Okay, here we go. And this is Anne doing her daily yoga session almost every day. And in fact, you apologize when you're not available, which I find interesting. So here we go.
I take it very serious.
Sister almost forgot music.
Well, I'm going to turn on the music right now, I think.
And is this your studio at home, Anne?
Yes.
Have you created this whole thing?
Yes. I transformed it into a studio for me.
Let's see who's here. Kay's here.
I have the same shirt on that I do today.
That's right. That's right.
No, or maybe this was today's.
Julie's here.
I think it's today's.
Oh my gosh, she's in Mexico watching.
That's right. I think it was 2 hours ago.
In Lubbock, Texas. Well, it was I think 108 here today. Woo! That's pretty darn hot, isn't it? But now I'm inside with the fan, air conditioning, so we are all set for yoga. Put our hands in prayer. Just let's start with a little gratitude. Just the many blessings that are in your life. This has been very challenging times. If we dig deep, or maybe you don't even have to dig that deep, can you find some really positive things that have happened in your life recently? And give those some attention.
You know what I find amazing, Anne? At 18, you are still able to keep the lotus pose perfect. I can't do it. I have difficulty in getting into the lotus posture.
Yeah, I think it's years and years of just not giving it up, you know? If you stay with something and stay with it.
Yeah, I'm going to just fast forward a little bit.
A movement, right.
This time now we're going to start to roll the back, round the back, hump the back out kind of, and then walk the hands back. Inhale, lower back sinks, go to the floor. Oh, that should feel really good on the spine. Round up first before you move the hand. And then take your right arm up, look up, called thread the needle. Take your one arm through, go on to the elbow or go on to the shoulder. And if you can, take your left arm behind you. And you will find the twist. Maybe it's looking to the side, maybe it's looking back.
Wow. Let me see if I can see a little further again.
Pose of child is great too.
Cobra.
You know what I find amazing, Anne?
What's that?
Your practice is really meditative.
Pose of child.
It's because I came to yoga to heal. I didn't come as an exercise, see?
Yeah.
There's a lot of difference. I was like you, very high strung by nature, pushing my body way too hard. And I had to do a healing practice, see?
I used to be a yoga practitioner as a child. My dad taught me, and we used to see on television in India. And it was as both a body-mind somatic practice, psychosomatic process, if you will, which means really taking care of the body and the embodied mind and the embodied, feelings, emotions, thoughts, the whole 8 Ashtanga, as we call it, the 8 limbs of yoga, the whole 9 yards, not just the physical practice. And that's what I see in every single time you practice. You're not just talking about taking care of the body, but in the process of taking care of the body, we take care of the conflicts in the mind and everything, which is amazing.
And that's an intuitive thing. That was never taught to me. And I've taken so many classes, like in Santa Cruz and all, they don't address that. It's more of a physical workout, to tell you the truth.
Yes.
Some are more gentle, some are stronger. But it's always about how you do the pose, never what's happening inside your body or, what your body's saying to you or what's your mind, what's going on in that head of yours, or it's usually not addressed.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways it's a disservice because the whole purpose of yoga, the word yoga is, means union. And union with what? With our higher self. Or if you were to use the language of psychology, that would mean our collective conscious. Not just this body, but other people around me, and understanding of the difference between inside and outside. How do you bridge that gap? And the only way we can do it is to breathe, because we are always breathing in and out. We're taking
Right.
the universe in. And I love the way you do it. You don't give all the theory. You're not talking about this like I am right now.
It's, you know, it's a spirit, to me, it's more of a body, mind, spirit practice. And I'm not very intellectual anyways, I'm more in the heart. So I probably talk that way. Some people want to know all the fancy names, they want the poses done just right. My thing is, I had hurt my leg a while ago, and I was telling my students, if I was in a class and they said, now you had to put your leg right here, well, what if my leg was sore and I couldn't do it? I don't believe that you follow the teacher, because your body knows if something's not right. You just don't do it because the teacher says we're going into this kind of down dog or this kind of triangle. Or...
That's true. That's true. In fact, our body has a mind of its own. And by listening to the body, everything shifts.
I love that, as a mind of its own.
I really learned this clearly when I was doing what's known as ecstatic dance or 5 rhythms and those practices, that how to listen to the body. I'd never listened to the body. All my consciousness was here for the longest time. But when we start stretching our body, then our mind starts stretching. The mind comes out of the body and they co-create each other. So, I mean, the way you do it is so intuitive, natural. That's the way yoga was always supposed to be.
Thank you. It really comes from spirit. I mean, it's not like, how do I say, it's from a higher place than just me. You know,
Yes.
It's not the at all. It's somewhere God working through me or spirit working through me. Or because, you know, I'm very, very nervous in front of people. I don't like groups of people. Now, I can handle wisdom because they're all spirit-based. I don't do cocktail parties at all. I can go do yoga and feel totally at ease. It's like I'm guided through or something from a higher place.
Yeah, yeah. It's like even when we are talking, the pauses can be a lot more sometimes than the words. And I see that in you. I see that in you. I see that in Soaring. I've met Ben Saltzman, your son-in-law. I've met Zoe, all of them at different times. And believe it or not, I learned to pause by meeting people like you. The need for pause in our life, the need for pauses in our conversation. Were you always like this, or did that shift at a certain stage in your life?
I was, let's see, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. I was born to a kind of, not super conservative, but relatively conservative household of Republicans. Not that that matters that much. But I had a very traumatic, my brother was born with deformed arm. He was born 5 years before me. And my mother, it was so bad when he was born that my mother, they wrapped him up at first, didn't show my mother, because this was before natural childbirth or anything. And about the 3rd day, they unwrapped him, and she said, I don't want that child. He had an arm that was here and then 3 fingers. And I didn't know this till years later. My aunt took care of him for a long time, of my brother. So when I was born, they wanted me to make up for everything that Chuck wasn't to them, because they, you know, he was handicapped. Well, it wasn't the way I was wired. Like, I wasn't ever a cheerleader. I was never a good student. I was never, all the things, the external things that they felt that I needed to be, to show off the family, so to speak, to make the family proud or whatever, I could never do. So I probably was a little different all along, yeah. My values were different.
Wow. Wow. Thanks for sharing this, because a lot of times when we see people who have come to a stage in their life and they seem to be in balance and they seem to be, you know, really in control of the situation, someone like you who was doing daily yoga through this pandemic, through these challenging times, through the California fires, there's an automatic assumption people make that, oh, she must have been gifted, born like this. Like what you said about Soren, he was probably born like that. But that's not always the case. We learn through the crucible of life, isn't it?
I had a shaman tell me once, joy is wonderful, but what we learn the most is through sorrow and challenges. That's why I'm hoping we learn through this time. We have more time to go inward in this pandemic, you know. I'm hoping there's some good lessons learned.
Yeah, and is there anything specifically that you have learned in the last few months of giving and paying? And you even moved, right? You moved one time?
Okay, yeah, I moved. I had oh, this is funny, giving away my stories as a senior woman. I met this man on one of the dating things, and the man I live with now. But he lived in Jamestown, and I was in Santa Cruz at the time. And so this was about 3 years ago. And when we first talked, he said, well, the only thing is I live 3 hours away, you know. And I said, well, that's not terrible. It's not like living in New York City and, you know, California. So we probably talked on the phone for 6 weeks. And then finally he drove down, and we really liked each other just talking, you know. And he drove down, and as soon as I saw him, I kind of knew. Because maybe it was so much more than just what they looked like, because we discussed and talked every day. And then we still did that back and forth for about a year. And then I moved here.
Wow, and you literally moved during the pandemic, from what I understand. Is that true?
Oh, you mean when I came to California?
No. From Santa Cruz to this location that you're in now.
Yeah.
How did you manage to move during all these?
Oh, it was before. I moved before that.
Oh, okay.
2.0 that just made it, remember?
Just in time.
But part of it is when this pandemic hit, this is a small town, they don't always believe in it much. They're like, oh, different people, barbers and people like that in town say, oh, well, it's just, you know, they're exaggerating it. And so it's kind of hard as a senior, because I know I'm high risk. A lot of people don't wear masks here. I find there's a lot of resistance, and that makes it, I don't get angry very much, but I get frustrated with people when I go to the store and they're not, you know. Today I saw 2 people without masks.
Yeah. And then again, this is where we see this divisiveness everywhere. It's become polarized, not just physically and our view on healthcare, but also the whole political and all that. I think it's very important for us to heal by connecting and being together. Have you been able to do that, living in the woods, away from the city and seeing divergent opinions about different things? Have you been able to find common ground?
It's very difficult. Santa Cruz is probably more my kind of people. They're more progressive, they're more into new ideas, and, you know, anything goes sort of type thing. Here it's very not progressive at all. My chiropractor says, oh, you know, we're like 30 years behind. So it's hard. I love this man that I'm with, and that really helps to be with somebody. He's very patient with me and very kind with me. And I really, really appreciate that. And I'm making some, you know, I have a friend I had a coffee date with. The friendships are coming slowly. But I think, you know, what's so fascinating, I think if you have what do I call it? Inner life of spirit, of prayer, of meditation, that makes me feel kind of pretty whole. I don't think you need as much outside yourself then.
You know, I know through your work every day, the yoga practice that you are already connected with people, and I feel that you're like a karma yogi. In other words, your action speaks for itself. But do you have any suggestions? Do you have any words of wisdom for people who may be going through anxiety, who may be going through challenges, also a lot of anger and resentment at what's happening around us? Do you have any words of wisdom on how they can find peace and continue to do their work? How can they find that groundedness that you seem to have?
This is a hard one because the brain gets so wired, and I've seen this in my own self. I can obsessively think and go off. I would say if I had any advice, it would probably be if they could even sit, it's not saying meditate for 30 minutes or anything. If they could sit for 5 minutes in the morning and just deep breathe. My daughter, Karina, you know, Ben's wife, she does this maybe 10 minutes is all before her daughter gets up, and she'll just go into the deep breathing, sitting, you know, in cross-legged. And everybody has 5 to 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, yeah. I do my digital fast at least half an hour a day. Otherwise, it's so easy to get engrossed in these devices.
So true, so true. Another thing I think is gratefulness and gratitude.
Yeah,
If we could start our day, and I try to remember to start my day and end my day, what am I so grateful for today? Because it's easy in this time. Oh my God, I'm lonely, I'm frustrated, you know, I'm worried about money, worried about my health. If you could just say, okay, this is what I have going for me though, you know? On a personal level, what happened to me, now this is fascinating. I have a wonderful brother and sister that live in Michigan. We would talk maybe Christmas and birthdays, right? I just started realizing I had more time and life is short. I started calling them up. Now I probably talk to them twice a week. Isn't that a gift? I mean, this was years that I didn't talk to them, Heidi. I mean, we weren't strange at all.
wow.
We were busy and doing other things. And I love my brother and sisters, like, I've been, you know, and it all happened in March. And I said, I better check, you know?
And this is the gift of the corona. I mean, as much as we dislike having a virus among us creating havoc in our lives, it has changed the way we see life itself, isn't it?
You know what? I keep wondering, I don't know how you feel about this. What are the lessons we're supposed to get out of this? Do you have any feelings about what we're supposed to learn?
My answer changes every day and depending on the time of the day. But
That's a
for
good,
sure, I was like, most of my life I was a go-getter. And somebody recently introduced that phrase to me. It says, why can't we shift from being a go-getter to a go-giver? Go give
oh,
something, go
sweet.
share something. And I
How
was like,
sweet.
I said, why give? Why not share? He said, because taking isn't very natural. All of us, I want this, I want that, you know.
So true.
Yeah, I mean, well, there are many of us who don't have enough compassion for the self, especially young mothers and people who didn't take care of themselves. So they need to be told to receive as well. But
Right.
giving takes effort because we come out of this feeling of scarcity that I don't have enough.
If we could get rid of that.
Yeah, yeah. If we can just learn to give and to receive, so go
Both of
givers and go sharers, that's much better than just being go getters. You know, we are so obsessed with the doingness of things. Even in yoga practice, there are these sweat yogas and the super fast Bikram yogas, which may be better for health in terms of getting the whole adrenaline activated, but they don't necessarily contribute to the calmness that I see in you or that I see in many of the yogis who do it with a little bit of patience.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think it goes against the grain of yoga. I laugh. I think if I want to do something really fast, I go to a Zumba class. Or, you know, I think the nature of yoga, to tell you the truth, it should be very meditative. It's the spirit of it. And it
Yes.
doesn't mean it's strong. I'll do these sun salutations very slow, but when I get into the plank, which is like sort of like top part of the push-up, I can just feel my muscles, and I'll be aware of how strong, and I'll firm it to my body.
Yeah, I find that you're so centered. I'm sure you're often in the here and now. But do you still have aspirations about what you want to be 5 years from now? Where do you want to go? It's not just a
Why?
question for teenagers, it's for everybody.
Well, it was so interesting because my little grandson said to me, he's 18, little, Grandma, you realize you're getting older. You probably don't have that many years left. I know what I'd like 5 years from now. Not to be afraid to die. That's my spiritual work. I still have a lot of fear around dying. Just being honest with you. It's all the work I've done, right? That's my shadow, as Ben would say. That's my shadow on a spiritual realm. So I am, that's where I want to be 5 years from now. I want to be still doing yoga and facing death with grace too when it ever comes, you know.
Wow. Wow. I lost my mother just about 2 years ago around this time. And she had a difficult life when she was young. In fact, she had many suicide attempts too. But the grace with which she was able to let go of her body in the last 4 months of her life was just amazing. And I was with her. I was very lucky because I had retired from my tech business, that I was with her for the last 4 months of her life. And the great, all she wanted was meditation, bhajans, kirtans. So I would sing to her every day, or I would play music for 2 to 3 hours every day. She was not even eating food. She would just listen to the music and she would be really happy.
Well, you know, my dad, my brother was a doctor, a nephrologist, but my dad, he was in Michigan and I was in Texas when he died. He was 94 and a half, okay? Here he was on his deathbed saying to my brother who was a doctor, Jim, don't let me die. Don't let me die. He was terrified to die at 94 and a half. And that's what my fear is, that I want to be able to let go, like your mother did, into the next transition.
Wow. And I mean, seeing your spirit and how much you like to give, how much you like to share every single day. May God give you the energy to continue like this for years and years. And may the goddess always be with you. It's such an amazing thing to see you every single day. I don't always do the yoga practice with you because right now I'm in India, so I'm 12 and a half hours apart.
Yeah.
But I watch it, and I watch your shares every day on social media. The centeredness with which you write, in spite of all the chaos around, it's amazing.
Well, I want to know, I have a question for you before we end. You seem so happy. What is the source of your happiness?
I know.
Joyful.
Well, there was a time when I believed in the phrase, fake it till you make it. So there was a time when I used to fake it. And it was actually my own family, my two children, boy and girl, and my wife, who called me out on it. They said, you look like you're happy, but there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of pain. Why don't you deal with it? And it was not easy. But over time, I was very fortunate to be in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And having grown up in a tradition of yoga, that I was able to find teachers, and not just teachers from India, not just teachers in the Hindu tradition. I found, in fact, there were many churches around me. Right behind my home in Cupertino, there's the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and I had many Mormon friends. There was a Korean church. There were many Buddhist temples, as you know. The Bay Area has a lot of rich Buddhist tradition from the time of Suzuki Roshi to Vipassana and Zen traditions. So SLN and even Spirit Rock. So I was really on a journey for maybe more than 15 years. So that fake happiness or pretend happiness, which many of us do, you know, we want to look cool and all that stuff, that kind of dissolved. And there were times when I would be in anguish and people would worry about me. But all that internal conflict eventually came out. And when we empty ourselves of all the pain and misery, it's true that they say in almost every single tradition that when you are empty yourself of all the junk that we carry, then sort of God comes in or the spirit comes in.
I would agree with you. Good job for you, though.
And again, I mean, it's no guarantee that, I mean, there could be a mishap tomorrow. I could lose something and I could be miserable again. But life is much simpler. Life is much simpler. I don't feel the need to pretend anymore.
See, that's why it was very interesting, because when I went in, I had this rectal bleeding, and they were going in to see if I had a hemorrhoid, and then they found this polyp thing that he thought was cancerous and all, which wasn't. But somebody said, "Oh, you wouldn't talk about that, would you, like put on faith?" I said, "What are you talking about? I don't think that we have to hide so much. Body parts of, you know what I mean? People get things. Farrah Fawcett died of rectal cancer. You know,
I think, I'm reminded of this researcher, Dr. Brene Brown, who researched shame and vulnerability. In fact, early on in her career, she researched shame. And there's so much shame in our society, and particularly for women.
Shame.
You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, this is not right, and you can't talk about this.
Yeah.
And the reality is that when we go beyond shame, it's like grieving the things that we are shameful for into feeling vulnerable and being okay with being vulnerable. And what I saw when you posted just the last week, or maybe this week, that there was a health emergency, and you said, "I'll keep you all updated, but I'm feeling vulnerable," was that anybody who cares for you is like, we start praying immediately, saying, "And we are here for you." Many of us did not even write verbally because that was too much.
I had 153 comments, I think. And
Yeah.
You know what? It may have been, because he was pretty certain it was cancer that day. It may have been all those prayers. Because it was like a miracle. All of a sudden I had this, didn't know what was going to happen. And she calls and said, it could have been, I didn't correlate it. It could have been those hundreds of people that were praying for me.
And I mean, we have this belief that all that is just woo-woo and all. It's not. There's a lot of proof. I mean, there's a lot of science behind the power of prayer, the power of faith, the power of trust. Yeah, we don't want blind faith, believe that Clorox will cure me of all the evils. We don't have to being blind. We have to listen to our doctors as you are. We have to listen to our healers as you are, and go and get the tests done as you are doing. And yet, there is power in having community, having trust, and the power of sharing, the power of giving. I like Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about the power of vulnerability, the power of mindfulness, the power of simplicity. He doesn't talk about the power of money. Yes, we all know that money can buy you a lot of power, that being in a politically strong position will buy you a lot of power, will get you a lot of power. But there's a lot of power. Sorry?
It doesn't buy a lot of things, does it? Like inner peace?
It doesn't buy inner peace, it doesn't buy love, it doesn't buy, there are many things gratitude can buy that the outer things cannot. And therein lies the magic. I mean, I see that in you every day. I see that in many people like you. And it's a reminder.
Yeah. You can almost tell people, like, I see your smile and I see your light. It's almost people that believe that way and actually live it too in certain forms of fashion. You can see it in their whole essence.
And I mean, you and I have had hundreds of teachers along the way. Hundreds of people.
Aren't we lucky to have teachers,
Yesterday, India celebrates a day every year called Teachers' Day. I think yesterday was Teachers' Day. And I got hundreds of messages from people, and I sent back hundreds saying, every student is my teacher too, right? And every teacher learns from me as well. So it's a mutual thing. It's never one way, isn't it?
No. And maybe one of the secrets too is to get away from being arrogant. Get away from, like you said, well, yeah, but every student, that's the real truth. But when we get in this power and we get caught into that, how can we be humble and still have confidence but be humble?
I have to be honest, since you asked that question and made this comment, that was the hardest thing for me. And that arrogance of having been through some elite schools and being born in an elite religion or whatever, and shedding that, the arrogance that comes with it, shedding that airs around me, that took the longest. And
Interesting. Hard to give up, huh?
my friends and family still remind me, oh, I see a little bit of self-righteousness there, and I listen a lot more now.
See, before you probably got a little more defensive. Now you're open. You have the ears to hear it.
Yeah,
That's how we grow.
and even interviewing, I started interviewing people during the pandemic, just talking to people. And the first thing I realized was how much I was eager to talk. I'm a much better listener now.
But you have great stories too. That's the neat thing with you. It's fun because I feel like I could ask you a question too because I'm curious. Like, how did you get so happy? This is really important in life. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I learned the sad lesson when I was in 2002 that no amount of money can buy happiness. When I lost my dad in 2002, pretty suddenly in October of 2002, I had not seen him in 4 years. And the reason I had not seen him in 4 years was because I was obsessed with making a big Bay Area technology company success. And I was obsessed with raising money through the dot-com crash in 99, through the 9/11 crash in 2011, 2001, 9/11, 2001, which is coming up. And I just didn't have time to see my dad for 4 years. That was the biggest reset in my life, realizing that my priorities were completely messed up.
It took a big, big hit on you, yeah, to realize. But that sometimes is the only way you're going to change.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you knocked over. I gotta look at this. And you did change. Some people wouldn't, you see.
Yeah, and it took me like 9 months to even be okay with it, that I had not seen my dad for 4 years. Be okay with it and to forgive myself.
It's very restrained from my mother at semi anyways. With her death, I did not get there for her death. And you're right, the guilt and the shame, it took me a long time. Maybe still there, a little.
And I mean, this is where the truth is. It's easy to fall for smiling faces, and on Facebook, for example, or on social media, we always put out the nicest.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not gonna take a picture of myself crying or angry. And if you ask my family, they'll tell you.
My parents say we did not have a real happy childhood as a kid. And they always say, happy family. That was so much not what we were. But that was what the Better Homes and Gardens said. This is the ideal family. Everybody is just fine and happy. So I've got a great to share a little bit about their pain, even on Facebook. A lot of people have said, I'm struggling right now. That's more the real truth.
Yeah. It takes a lot of courage. And I mean, I see that in you. You have a lot of courage to share your vulnerabilities, to be completely transparent and not just give that positive side. I'm not there yet.
It's taken me. And, I've had cancer twice. I think what it is life experiences too. And when you've told me your story, wow, where you've been from money to now, what you're doing and caring about people and helping people, you've come a long way.
Yeah. When I was younger, it was all about, I want this, I don't have this. Growing up almost on the edge of the ghettos in Bombay, it was all about acquiring this and all. And I completely bought into the capitalistic paradigm of, I want this, I want that. There's no limit to what I wanted. And funnily enough, India was socialist at that time. So my education was free. I practically had to pay nothing for my entire education. And yet, my whole focus was on acquiring things until I lost my father at the age of 38. And that was a big reset switch. And I said, I got so much from society. Sorry?
Were you there a little bit already going in that direction when your dad died, or was it like that just did it?
Oh, well, my body was falling apart a few months before that. I did my first 10-day retreat of Vipassana. And I kind of got the inkling that my dad was aging during those 10 days of silence. I could see him aging over the years. And something in me said, go see your dad. But even after 10 days of silence, the urge to take my company to the next step was so high. And we were in the midst of 9/11, 2001, and all that stuff.
Right.
It was very hard. So my focus still continued to be, how do I make money? How do I make my company successful? My whole ego was entangled in the success of the company.
Yeah.
So
And you know,
that took a while to get out of.
Did you were familiar with Andrea and Stephen Levine?
Sorry?
I don't know if you've ever followed Stephen and Andrea Levine. He
Yes.
passed of just, well, they were one of my great teachers. And one of the things they always said is, have mercy on you. Like when we start beating ourselves up, like the dad or my mother, have some mercy. We do the best we can at that time for what we know at that time.
Exactly. And, even those feelings of guilt, even those beating myself up, getting out of that was a great process. I mean, I've had so many amazing teachers, like Christine Neff, who talks about self-compassion and embodies it, having gone through her own suffering.
Right.
Brene Brown, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And there are so many teachers. I mean, everywhere you see teachers. Amma, the hugging mother.
The hugging. Zoe got me her book.
And it's just, there are so many amazing teachers anywhere you go on earth. I've had teachers from the Kabbalah and Jewish traditions, and from the Islamic traditions, Sufi traditions, which brought me into regular dance practices.
Oh, I have to ask you one question. How did you get to ecstatic dance?
Oh, very funny that you asked, because when I started sitting meditation in 2002 to get out of my physical pain, it was difficult for me to sit for more than, say, 2-3 hours at a stretch. In strict mindfulness meditation, like long retreats, people tend to sit for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. I could not do that. So finally, I Googled for dance with no steps because I had the urge to move, especially after my dad passed away. And both my parents were good dancers at one time. I mean, folk dancers. So I Googled dance with no steps, and it showed me Mountain View 5 rhythms. At the time, the teacher was Lori Smullen, whose current name is Claire Alexander, and she was my first dance teacher. And once I got into that, there was no going back. So I alternate between sitting meditation and dance meditation now.
I just love you got two totally different tools.
Yes, because it's like the yin and the yang you referred to earlier. There are people who can just sit and be silent and come to terms with themselves. And that's great, all power to them. But there are others who have gone through, usually people have gone through what's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They have more difficulty in sitting. I have a lot more difficulty in sitting for hours. So movement practices like Tai Chi, movement practices like moving meditation can be a really good complement to sitting practices. Walking meditation, cooking meditation, gardening consciously. What are your hobbies like? Do you do other practices besides yoga and meditation?
I like to knit. I like knitting. I knit. I only make scarves because I don't follow a pattern. I don't know how to follow patterns. I just knit. And then what I do, when I was teaching in Lubbock, Texas, I had so many students. Like sometimes I'd have 40 students, and so I just bring all these scarves. So I'd make them and then just give them away. And I still do that. Now I just have to send them through the mail. So I like to knit. I don't have a whole lot of wide variety of things. Let me see what else. Oh, I have a rebounder. I like to jump on the rebounder. Little like a trampoline. Yeah. I love to read. And I guess that's about it.
And you have a loving family. And as luck would have it, I got to know various members of your family at different times.
We're real blessed to have we do something, a circle all the time. We just did one last weekend or last week. We sit together in circle and one person shares, we do a check-in. How's everybody doing? And when that person's talking, you're just constant listening, and then another. And not many families, I don't think, have that practice. But that's what we do. And the 18-year-old Soaring son sits right in there.
Wow.
He's quite amazing.
I met him. Is that Ben's son? I forgot your daughter's name.
Ben's got a little girl, 10, my granddaughter.
That's right.
What are your children? I never ask about your children.
Oh, my children, my daughter Shona is almost 27, and
Okay.
she's in New York now studying law. And my son is just over 25, and he's headed to Seattle to study pandemics and biostatistics. And they don't talk much about themselves, so I'll keep it to that. And my wife does some amazing work in working with compassionate care in emergency care during pregnancy and childbirth.
You told me that. That's beautiful work, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Seema is a very compassionate person. So if you see anything in me, I really owe it to my wife a lot. She's been one of my greatest teachers about how to live life in a very balanced way. I was the guy with the extremes, and she's more the, the more the balance.
That's a good balance, isn't it?
It's a good balance, and we've been together for 33 years now. So through all the challenges, 33 years.
90% of your happiness or unhappiness depends upon who you decide your life partner will be. I mean, it can be really, really hard, or it can be the most beautiful thing. Your happiness, a lot of it depends on who you choose.
Yeah, and I would certainly attest to that. My happiness is to a large extent because of my wife and the children who became my teachers. Like you said about Soaring, my son and my daughter have been my teachers all along. My daughter taught me how to dance, and my son taught me how to be silent and listen. And it's taken me a long time to learn. It has taken me a very long time to learn.
My lessons have been kind of slow too, you know? I'm still learning. 80 years old, I'm still learning.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? I still freak out at times, you know? Like
We are only human, right?
But the difference is, I know it's not healthy. I recognize it in my body, you know, if I'm too stressed, and I have tools to pull back. And you do too.
And then again, yeah, we are in the midst of the pandemic. To all those who are listening, it is easy to go through these challenges, especially now. There are times when we panic. We have an election coming up in the United States, which has polarized people even further. I won't get into the politics of it because that will take us into extremes. But we have a lot of things that are potentially dividing us, potentially pulling us apart. And in the midst of all this, how do we find that center point? In the midst of all this, how do we stay in integrity and authentic integrity, not just make believe, being nice? That's the challenge.
That's a good question, isn't it? I don't even know an answer to that. Do you have any ideas?
Sorry?
Do you have any ideas on that one? How do we
about or how to deal with politics?
Well, just even, I guess, maybe, yeah, and then, okay, there's even the things in here, in this town, the people that wear masks and the people that won't. We're almost going, you know?
Yeah, 4 years ago, I used to be the talker, and I would go around telling people, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, or do you realize this? That didn't help at all. It was almost crazy making. Especially I was also part of the election campaign and all that. It didn't help at all to be telling people what to do. Now I've become a much better listener.
Yeah, so I guess it does. Yeah, yeah. What happens to me when I get to the store? I guess because I'm an age group, I think it's like the responsible thing to do. And sometimes I'll go up to the manager of the store and say, "There's a couple people walking down aisle 3 that don't have their mask on." And then I feel kind of like the mask police. I don't know if that's a good idea, but I get that's my only really frustration. I've adapted pretty well to this staying in business.
Yeah, I mean, this again, when it comes to masks, I have friends in Sweden, and Bartola told me that this is what he told me based on his understanding of the situation. Sweden used a completely different approach, say, than from California, which is they
Okay.
said, let's go towards, what do you call it, towards herd immunity. But they did take care of themselves. They took care of their seniors. And
Mhm.
a lot of seniors did lose life because they went into opening up the economy, never really went into a lockdown at all. Of course, Sweden is much sparser than many other countries. The population is under 10 million. So it's a much
Mhm.
smaller community. It's easier to give directions. People follow directions. What he was saying was that in Sweden, they believe that the mask is not of much use. So which came as a shock to me. He said it's more important to have distance between people and then use the
Oh,
mask. So I don't know. I mean, I
I
don't know
don't
for
know.
sure. But he says that they make sure that there is enough distance between people. And a lot of the masks cannot really protect. That was his opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before that, I was also a mask Nazi. I was always telling people, and I stopped that.
My growth is not to be the mass Nazi. Get out of my meditation real quick.
So when I was in Mexico for 3 months during the pandemic, I was like, mascarilla, mascarilla, I would keep telling people, and they're like, they would. The funny thing about Mexico is that it also did not go into a lockdown. There is a lot of suffering right now, so I don't want to undermine that. It's not easy. Many countries have suffered, but they did not go into a full lockdown at all. They were much more like take responsibility for yourself. And when I first landed there in March, just 2 days before California went into the shelter in place, I actually
Listen,
escaped to
right on time.
Mexico. But I told my friends, do you know that this Corona is coming? They go, what Corona? We've got Corona beer, we've got Corona extra, and we've got virus vodka. Just drink Corona and virus. That was the image initially. But over time, people saw loss of life and disease. And in fact, the woman was cooking for me. She also had the symptoms and she was sick for about 2 to 3 weeks. So there was suffering. There was suffering, no question about that. And people became cautious, people became prudent. There was no full lockdown at all, but the big malls and the movie theaters were shut down, and people became much smarter about how to take care of themselves. It's not easy at all. There are no formulas that will
No.
work, but
And there's so many different theories, and
yeah,
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 yeah.
so many different conspiracy theories as well.
Mm.
Every day.
For one thing, these are trying times with the politics, with the fires, and in the United States here, we got the politics, fires, and COVID, of course, everywhere. And it's trying times for people. It really is, I think. I don't think many people would say, oh, few people have said, oh, this is really great because I've been able to work from home and, some positives too. But
Not easy, not easy.
I'm just
Well,
hugging people.
well, this is exactly why I'm talking to you. There are very few people who are able to bring themselves back at least a few minutes every day into that calm space. It's not
Yeah,
easy to become throughout the day because there's so much
so
media,
much going
there's so much, all kinds of divisive, all kinds of craziness happening, including us. We go crazy too, right? But
on. This
to be
is,
able to bring
I
ourselves
don't have,
back,
you're calm. I said, only part of the time. I can go crazy. Well, my thing is health. When I get something I get worried about my health, um, then I can, that's because I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, you know. But at least we can come back. Holy faith is one of my affirmations. I come back to holy faith.
Wow. Yeah. And with that, we'll probably say goodbye to the people listening to us. We will share the contact information for Anne. Facebook Live almost every day, and a lot of good sharing. I also am pretty active on social media. And yes, although I'm active on social media almost every day, I do take Facebook fasts, and at least 6 hours I'm completely off of these devices when I go to sleep. So it's a good idea to be off the devices as well.
On and off both. Thank you. I love your spirit.
I love your spirit, and I love the people who are listening to us. Please come forward. I would love to talk to you, maybe share a few words from you, learn from each other. And thank you, and thank you for taking the time to connect.
Namaste.
Namaste.